video on this channel, there's been almost 200,000 people like yourself who watched it, shared it, left a bunch of comments, and asking some of the same questions. Primarily, does any of this actually work? Well, 5 years of new research later, here's what's changed. And here's what's been confirmed, and here's what the science now says that it didn't say before. I'm Dr. John Martinez with the Healthy MD. I'm a primary care sports medicine physician with over 25 years of experience. And today I'm going to give you the 2026 update to my original autophagy and loose skin video. And before we dive in, I want to be upfront about two things. First, the core science I laid out in 2021 still holds up. Autophagy, which is your body's cellular recycling system, remains one of the most legitimate biological levers that we have for skin quality at the cellular level. And that hasn't changed. What has changed is the strength of the evidence behind it. Because here's the honest limitation I had to acknowledge in that first video. Almost all the autophagy research at that time was done in animals or cell cultures in a lab. We were extrapolating to humans. And that was the right thing to say then, and it was the right reason to be cautious as well. That's now changed. We now have human data, human clinical trials showing autophagy genes being upregulated in real people during fasting. And there's at least one entirely new autophagy pathway that's been discovered in skin cells we didn't even know existed back in 2021 when I did that first video. And number two, since I posted that original video, something else has happened that no one really fully saw coming. Millions of people have lost significant amounts of weight on the GLP-1 medications, whether we're talking about Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and those people are now asking the exact same question my original viewers were asking back then. What do I do about all this loose skin? So this update is for both groups, whether you lost the weight the old-fashioned way or on a GLP-1. The biology we're talking about or about to cover applies to you. And if you haven't seen the original 2021 video, I'll link to it at the end. I think it's still worth watching as a foundation, but everything you need to understand as far as the new research is right here in this video. So let's get into it. So here's what the 2021 video got right, the foundation of the science that still holds up. And what I'd like to do is start with what we got right in that first video, because I want you to understand that this is not a retraction. That foundation is still solid. What we're doing here today is building on top of it with stronger evidence. Here's the core mechanism explained as simply as I can. Your skin has a structure because of a protein called collagen. And collagen is produced by cells in your dermal layer and your skin layer called fibroblasts. So think of the fibroblasts as being construction workers of your skin. They build and maintain scaffolding that keeps the skin firm and elastic. And when you start to lose a significant amount of weight, the fat underneath your skin shrinks faster than the skin itself can adapt. And you're left with that loose, sagging appearance, either on your arms or on your stomach, and other parts of the body. And the question is, can anything be done at the cellular level to help fibroblasts do their job better? And that's where the concept of autophagy comes in. Now, if you don't remember, autophagy is the two Greek words for self and eating, and it's your body's built-in cellular recycling center. So when a cell generates a bunch of proteins and worn out cellular debris, autophagy kicks in and cleans house. It breaks down that junk and either recycles it for energy or uses the raw materials to build new functional cellular components. Now, here's the critical connection to loose skin. A 2014 study published in the journal Biochemical and Biophysical Research Communications looked directly at autophagy in human dermal fibroblasts, those skin construction workers I was just talking about, and tried to compare the young fibroblasts to older fibroblasts. And what they found out was pretty telling. In the older fibroblasts, autophagy was impaired. That makes sense. The cellular recycling system was getting clogged up, and when the researchers artificially blocked autophagy in the young and healthy fibroblasts, essentially mimicking what happens in old cells, those fibroblasts also lost their ability to produce the type 1 procollagen, hyaluronic acid, and elastin. And all those are components for healthy skin. The conclusion was direct. Impaired autophagy leads to deterioration of skin integrity and skin fragility. In other words, when fibroblasts can't clean themselves out, they stop building collagen. And when you stop building collagen, your skin loses its nice, healthy structure. And then in 2018, a research team in South Korea published a follow-up study in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences that looked at this same question, how autophagy and age affects skin cell fibroblasts, with a more complicated and more sophisticated tools, including electron microscopy and RNA sequencing. I know it sounds super technical, but their finding added an important nuance to the research. The total number of autophagosomes, the structures that do the actual cleanup, were not dramatically different between the old and the new fibroblasts. those older fibroblast cells were producing waste faster than the recycling system could handle it. So think about it like this. There's a garbage truck that's still running around, but the neighborhood is generating more trash faster, or generating trash faster than the garbage truck can pick it up. So the system isn't keeping up, and that's what the backlog is that leads to the cellular dysfunction we see as skin aging. And so their conclusion was that autophagy may not simply decline with age, but that capacity to keep cells clean relative to the waste being generated becomes insufficient. And so it's garbage in versus garbage out, and that's what contributes to the skin aging. So my 2021 video is right about this. Healthy autophagy and fibroblasts is essential for skin, or for collagen production and skin integrity. Anything that restores or enhances autophagy in those cells, at least in theory, is a meaningful lever that we can use for improving our skin quality. The remaining question, and the one I was honest about in 2021, and the one that new research has just started to answer, is whether or not fasting actually does that in real humans in a clinically meaningful way. And that's what we're going to cover next. So let's learn what the science has added. I'm going to walk you through 3 distinct areas where the research has really meaningfully advanced since 2021. And I'll be clear throughout about what these studies actually are showing and what they aren't. The collagen connection is now stronger than ever. The first area is probably most directly relevant to you if you're dealing with the loose skin, and that's the relationship between fibroblast, autophagy, and collagen production. In August of 2024, researchers published a major review in the journal Experimental Gerontology, specifically focused on autophagy and fibroblasts and its impact on skin aging. And this wasn't a single experiment, it was a combination of a current body of evidence. And their conclusion was direct. As fibroblasts age and undergo cell death, collagen, elastic fibers, and hyaluronic acid all decrease, and all this leads to skin losing its elasticity. And autophagy sits right at the center of that process, regulating whether or not fibroblasts stay functional or degrade and die off. Critically, the review confirmed that fibroblasts can stay active using something called TGF-beta signaling through that signals autophagy. And this TGF-beta is one of the primary drivers of collagen productions. In other words, healthy autophagy in fibroblasts just doesn't prevent breakdown, it actively signals for new collagen to be built. And then in January 2025, another research team published a study in the International Urogynecology Journal that looked at autophagy and collagen degradation in human fibroblasts under oxidative stress. Now, I want to be clear about something in this study, and this is the kind of thing I think you deserve to know when we're talking about the research, that the fibroblasts in this study actually came from vaginal tissue and not from skin. So it's not really a skin study, obviously, in the traditional sense, but here's why it's still relevant and still important to when we talk about autophagy and loose skin. Fibroblasts essentially are fibroblasts, regardless if they're in your skin or vaginal tissue or wherever they are. The core biology, that relationship between autophagy, oxidative stress, collagen degradation, operates through the same cellular machinery, regardless of where in the body those fibroblasts come from. And this 2025 study placed those cells under oxidative stress conditions, which mirrors exactly what happens in aging tissue. And the conclusion was pretty clear, that autophagy directly inhibits degeneration by oxidative stress in the fibroblasts. And what does that mean in plain English? Autophagy can slow down the breakdown of collagen, which is one of the important structures, support structures of your skin. So we're not extrapolating wildly here, but I want you to understand exactly what this study showed and what it didn't. It supports the mechanism. It's not a skin fibroblast study, it's a vaginal fibroblast study. And that distinction matters a little bit, but I just want you to understand there's a little bit of difference as far as where those fibroblasts came from. But again, fibroblasts are fibroblasts. The second area is something that was generally surprised me when I came across it, because it didn't even exist in the literature when I made the 2021 video. And in January of 2025, researchers in Japan announced findings that were published in two peer-reviewed journals, the Journal of Biological Chemistry and Autophagy Reports, on something called alternative autophagy. And here's the distinction that matters. The autophagy we've been talking about, the type that's triggered by fasting, is what we consider conventional autophagy. It cleans up damaged proteins and organelles through a well-mapped pathway. Alternative autophagy is a separate, distinct cellular recycling mechanism. It activates specifically when cells sustain heavy damage, particularly from UV radiation or sunlight. And it works through a different molecular route, one that we didn't even know about, that processes proteins ATG5 and ATG7. So now what this research found is that this alternative autophagy pathway works by clearing damaged mitochondria in the skin cells. And when the damaged mitochondria wasn't cleared, their inflammatory cascade occurred. So the alternative autophagy actually clears that all out before it happens. So why does this matter for loose skin? Because it tells us autophagy in skin is not just a single switch. It's a system with multiple pathways, each with different triggers and different roles. We're likely in the very early stages of understanding how to optimize these systems therapeutically. Now, this is the update I'm most excited about because it directly addresses the biggest limitations I acknowledged in the original 2021 video. In 2021, I told you that almost all the autophagy research had been done in animals or in isolated cell cultures in the lab. We were making reasonable extrapolations to humans, but we didn't have direct human evidence. That's now changed. So in early 2025, researchers published a prospective human study in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition that followed 51 overweight and obese adults through 4 consecutive weeks of dawn to dusk intermittent fasting. They weren't just measuring weight or metabolic markers, they were also measuring autophagy gene expression directly. And the results are really significant. After 4 weeks of fasting, expression of one autophagy gene increased over 4 times from the start of the study. Expression of a second autophagy gene nearly doubled. And at the same time, body weight, BMI, overall fat mass, LDL cholesterol, and inflammatory markers like interleukin-6 all decreased significantly in the study. So let me be precise about what this means and what it doesn't. This study measured autophagy gene upregulation in blood cells, not in skin fibroblasts directly. So we can't say that fasting caused a 4-fold increase in the autophagy genes in your skin cells. But what we can say is that fasting did produce measurable significant upregulation of autophagy-related genes in living humans in blood cells, which is a significantly stronger statement than anything that we had in animal literature or what we had back in 2021. And then there's this. In 2025, a pilot study run by researchers at Cedars-Sinai and the University of Texas in San Antonio that was published in the journal Geroscience tested a 5-day fasting mimicking diet in healthy human subjects and directly also measured something called autophagic flux, not gene expression, but autophagic flux, which means the actual rate of cellular cleanup activity. They confirmed that this fasting mimicking diet measurably enhances autophagy in humans. And the lead investigator described as one of the first studies that evaluate the dynamic process of autophagy in humans during this clinical nutrition intervention. And alongside the other autophagy findings, they show improvement in insulin sensitivity and fasting glucose. So this is meaningful for a topic because it tells you don't necessarily have to do extended multi-day water fasts to trigger clinically measured autophagy in your body. A structured 5-day reduced calorie protocol may also get you there as well. So that's new research, stronger mechanistic evidence on fibroblasts and collagen, a newly discovered autophagy pathway in skin cells that we didn't know existed, and for the first time, real human clinical trial data showing fasting upregulates autophagy genes and autophagic flux in living people. What hasn't changed is the honest limitation we'll cover in the next section because it's still there and you deserve to know it. So what the science still can't tell us. So I've just walked you through some new research that show the stronger mechanism evidence, a newly discovered autophagy pathway in skin, and the human clinical data that we didn't have back in 2021. So the evidence and the science is moving in the right direction, but since I'm a physician, and my job is to give you an accurate picture, not just the parts that sound good, so let's talk about what the research still can't tell us. Because these limitations matter, and any physician who skips this part, I think, is not being straight with you. The biggest gap in the literature, and it was there in 2021 and it's still here in 2026, is this. There is no randomized controlled trial that has taken a group of people with loose skin after weight loss and put them on an intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting protocol and measured skin laxity or elasticity as a direct outcome. That study does not exist. What we have is a mechanism that is increasingly well supported at each link. Fasting, we know, triggers autophagy, and now we have human data that shows gene expression of autophagy genes that supports fibroblastic function. And there's multiple studies that confirm this, that healthy fibroblasts produce collagen. That we know. Collagen is essential for skin elasticity. We know that as well. But we don't have the full chain from my fasted 16 hours for 12 weeks and my loose skin measurably improved. There's not been a study that actually did that yet. We're still connecting the dots. Now the dots are real, and the connections are biologically plausible, And the evidence at each step has gotten stronger. But I want you to understand the difference between a supported mechanism and a proven clinical outcome or proven clinical research trial. While we have the former, we still do not have the latter. The second limitation, and this limitation is a little bit more technical, but still important. The human fasting study, as I cited, the study that measured the autophagy gene expression in peripheral blood cells, specifically immune cells circulating around the bloodstream, it's meaningful because it tells us that autophagy can be upregulated in response to fasting in humans, but it does not tell us specifically what's happening in your skin fibroblasts. Blood cells and skin fibroblasts may be slightly different with different metabolic profiles and potentially different autophagy responses to the same fasting stimulus. So while it's nice to make that connection, we still need to kind of put the brakes on. When I say fasting upregulates autophagy in humans, I mean that precisely. I don't mean once you're walking away that we have direct evidence of fibroblast-specific autophagy induction from fasting in humans. We don't have that yet. That would require skin biopsies before and after a fasting intervention, measuring fibroblast autophagy markers, and looking at collagen concentrations. To my knowledge, I haven't seen that study published yet. The third limitation, this one is the most important for managing your expectations if you're personally dealing with loose skin after weight loss. The degree to which any intervention, we're talking fasting, exercise, anything else that can improve loose skin, varies enormously from person to person. And the factors that drive that variation are largely outside your control. Age is the biggest one. The older you are when you lose your weight and have that loose skin, the less skin elasticity you have to work with. So a 35-year-old who loses 60 pounds has a meaningfully different skin remodeling potential than someone who's 58 years old who loses the same amount of weight. The total amount of weight that's lost matters too. Losing 30 pounds is a fundamentally different problem for your skin than losing 120 pounds. Beyond a certain threshold, and that threshold also varies by individual, no amount of autophagy optimization is going to fully restore that excess skin. The structural deficit is just simply too large. And the speed of weight loss also matters too, and this is particularly relevant for people who've lost a significant amount of weight on the GLP-1 medications. That rapid weight loss, losing significant amounts of weight over 6 to 12 months, gives your skin less time to adapt as that fat volume underneath it changes. Slower weight loss generally produces less severe and less noticeable loose skin to begin with because of that. And genetics matter too. So skin elasticity, your skin collagen density, the skin's ability to remodel after stretching, all have a significant genetic component. Some people lose substantial amount of weight and their skin rebounds remarkably well. Others lose a modest amount and struggle significantly with the loose skin. The research can't control for that. I can't tell you where you fall in that spectrum. The fourth limitation I want to name directly is this. For some people after significant weight loss, particularly if you've lost 80 to 100 pounds or more, the honest medical answer is that no dietary or lifestyle intervention is going to fully resolve that loose skin. The amount of excess skin is typically too much and beyond what cellular remodeling on its own can address. And that's not a failure, that's basic biology. And in those cases, a consultation with a board-certified plastic surgeon about body contouring procedures is a completely legitimate path. And I'm not here to sell you on fasting as a substitute for surgical evaluation when surgery is clinically appropriate. What I am saying is that fasting-induced autophagy gives you a tool, a biologically grounded, low-cost, evidence-supported tool to optimize your skin's cellular environment. For some people, that will produce visible improvement of their loose skin. For others, it will be a meaningful supportive measure alongside other approaches. For some with really significant weight loss and loose skin, it may be one piece of a larger picture that also includes that surgical consultation, as I mentioned before. So knowing where you stand requires an honest assessment of your individual situation, ideally with a physician who can look at you, understand your history, and give you a realistic picture. So that's the honest picture. Strong mechanism, improving human evidence, real limitations on the clinical endpoint. Now let's talk about what you can actually do. Let's talk about the practical recommendations that the 2026 evidence now supports. All right, you now have the science, you have the new research, and you have the honest limitations. So let's talk about what you can actually do. These are the practical levers that the current evidence supports, right from most to least important, at least in my clinical view. Recommendation number 1, intermittent fasting. This is the baseline. The first and most successful lever is intermittent fasting, and based on the human data we have now, that 16-8 fasting for 16 hours, eating within an 8-hour window is probably a reasonable starting point for most people. And here's what we know about the timing. Autophagy appears to be ramping up meaningfully somewhere in the 12 to 16 hours fasting as mTOR activity starts to decrease. And if you don't remember, mTOR stands for mammalian target of rapamycin. And this is an enzyme that acts as your cell's brain to regulate metabolism, growth, and cellular survival. The mTOR enzyme can sense cellular energy levels, and when mTOR is activated or turns on, it promotes protein synthesis and cell growth. And when mTOR is inhibited or turned off, it triggers cellular repair and recycling, along with activation of another molecule called AMPK, which is short for AMPK activated protein kinase, which is another cellular energy sensor that your cells, basically your cell's fuel gauge, that helps trigger that cellular cleanup. The human studies show significant autophagy gene upregulation used from dawn to dusk fasting, which for most people is 14 to 16 hours. And that's a real world, probably sustainable protocol that does produce some measurable results. Now, the honest caveat on timing is this: we don't have precise autophagy starts exactly at X hours number for humans. The animal data suggests peak autophagy activity tends to occur 24 to 48 hours after fasting range, but that doesn't mean that 16/8 fasting is ineffective. It means a consistent daily 16-hour fasting window is likely producing a meaningful cumulative autophagic stimulus over time, even if the per fast intensity is lower than an extended fast. So if you want to go beyond the 16/8 with an occasional 24-hour fast once or twice a week, what we call a 5-2 fasting method, that may give you some stronger per session stimulus. So extending fasting over 48 hours is outside what I recommend without medical supervision. And I think for most people it's really unnecessary, to be honest. But again, check in with your own physician if you're going to go down that route. It should be medically supervised. For people who struggle with water fasting or extended fasting, whether it's due to lifestyle or medications or blood sugar issues or simply finding it unsustainable, the fasting mimicking diet is now a legitimate evidence-supported option. And that's that 2025 Cedars-Sinai randomized controlled trial that specifically tested a 5-day fasting mimicking diet protocol and directly measure what we call that autophagic flux in humans. So it works by keeping calories low enough. And typically we're talking about 700 to 1,000 calories per day that keeps mTOR suppressed and autophagy is triggered while still providing enough nutrition to make the protocol tolerable and sustainable. Recommendation number 3, resistance training is more important than people realize. And this one doesn't get enough attention in the autophagy conversation it deserves to. Resistant training, which is lifting weights, resistance band, body weight training, is an independent autophagy inducer. Research shows that with resistant training in young men, autophagy markers are increased 48 hours after exercise, and that it suppresses mTOR and activates that AMPK that triggers that cellular cleanup. But resistance training has a second benefit, and it's directly related to loose skin specifically. So there was a 2023 study published in the Scientific Reports that followed 61 middle-aged women through a 16-week resistance training program and measured their skin outcomes directly. They found that the resistance training significantly improved skin elasticity, their skin thickness, and upper dermal structure integrity, and it upregulated the expression of collagen genes as well as other genes in that extracellular matrix that helps with skin integrity. So that's a study with resistance training showing improved collagen gene expression and skin elasticity in middle-aged women. And I think that's really relevant to a lot of people who are watching this video. And now there's a third reason why resistance training matters. It preserves and builds muscle mass. And after significant weight loss, especially with GLP-1 medications, which can cause muscle loss alongside the fat loss, maintaining muscle loss under the skin provides that structural support that keeps the skin from sagging further. And that's not a small point. So get out there and lift. So number 4, here's a trap I see people fall into. They start intermittent fasting aggressively to maximize autophagy. In doing so, they chronically undereat protein. And for skin remodeling after weight loss, that's counterproductive. Collagen is a protein. You need to understand that. Your fibroblasts need adequate amino acids, which are the basic building blocks of any protein molecule, to produce it. And while autophagy can optimize the cellular machinery, if the raw materials aren't there, the output's going to be limited. So for adults focusing on body composition and skin remodeling after weight loss, current evidence supports a protein intake somewhere between 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And this is higher than the general population recommendations, but it's consistent more with our sports medicine guidelines for people doing resistance training. And remember, that number is for kilograms, not pounds. The time your protein intake within your eating window when you're fasting. Don't sacrifice protein adequacy in the name of extending your fast. Those two are compatible. You just need to be intentional about your protein intake. Number 5, sleep is not optional as a conversation. During deep sleep, your body releases growth hormone, which is one of the primary drivers of tissue repair and collagen synthesis. So chronically poor sleep raises cortisol, it's going to increase your systemic inflammation, and it's going to impair the specific cellular repair processes you're trying to optimize with fasting. So you're basically defeating yourself. You can't fast your way out of bad sleep. If you're doing everything else right and getting 5 hours of sleep, you're leaving a significant portion of the benefit on the table. So I typically recommend 7 to 9 hours for most adults. Consistent sleep and wake times. This matters as much as the fasting protocol. And a final practical note. There is emerging evidence combining fasting with exercise, specifically training in a glycogen-depleted state, may produce additive autophagy benefits compared to either intervention alone. And the mechanisms overlap and appear to complement. They both suppress mTOR, both activate AMPK. They increase that cellular energy deficit that triggers that cleanup. That doesn't mean you have to train while fasted every session, but if you're doing 16-8 and you can schedule your workouts towards the end of your fasting window, you may be able to get a little bit more autophagy stimulus than either intervention alone would provide. And this is an area where the human data is still developing, but the rationale is solid on this. Let's summarize these recommendations order of importance. Consistent intermittent fasting, 16 hours minimum daily. More isn't always better, but consistency matters more than occasional long fast. Number 2, resistance training, at least 2 to 3 sessions a week. This is both a autophagy inducer and a direct driver of skin collagen gene expression. Number 3, adequate protein, that 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, timed within your eating window. Number 4, sleep. Like I said, 7 to 9 hours, consistent, non-negotiable. Number 5, if extended fasting is unsustainable for you, then a structured fasting mimicking diet protocol is now supported by human randomized controlled trials as an alternative. And 6, if you've lost 80 to 100 pounds or more, have an honest conversation with a board-certified plastic surgeon. While autophagy optimization is a meaningful tool, it does have its limits, and knowing where those limits are for your specific situation is important information to have. All right, so let's try to summarize this update on autophagy and loose skin. So 5 years ago, I made that video that talked about autophagy triggered by intermittent fasting was a biologically plausible, scientifically grounded approach to improving skin quality after weight loss and to help with loose skin. The mechanism made sense. The animal data was strong. The human data was limited back then. Here's what we stand in 2026. The mechanism is now better understood than ever before. We know that healthy autophagy in fibroblasts activates collagen-building signals through TGF-beta. We know that autophagy protects fibroblasts from oxidative stress-induced collagen degradation. We know there's an entirely separate autophagy pathway in skin cells called alternative autophagy that we didn't even know about when I made that original video, and appears to play a meaningful role in at least protecting skin from UV light damage and inflammation. And critically, we now have human data, real people, real fasting protocols, measurable upregulation of autophagy genes, and we also have a randomized controlled trial showing that a fasting mimicking diet produces detectable autophagic flux in humans, as well as measurable changes in their weight and BMI. And these are not animal studies, these are not cell cultures, this is human evidence, and it meaningfully strengthens our case. What it hasn't changed is my commitment to being honest with you about these limitations. We still don't have that randomized controlled trial measuring loose skin laxity as a direct outcome of fasting. That gap still remains, and the mechanistic change is well supported in every link, but the full clinical endpoint hasn't been tested in a controlled study. Now, that's not a reason to dismiss this approach. It's a reason to pursue it with realistic expectations. So here's my clinical bottom line. If you've lost significant weight and you're dealing with loose skin, whether from traditional diet and exercise or from a GLP-1 medication, intermittent fasting combined with consistent resistance training may give you the most biologically grounded, evidence-supported, non-surgical approach available right now. It addresses the cellular machinery that governs collagen production. It's low cost. It has meaningful benefits beyond the skin that includes metabolic health, inflammation, and longevity markers. And for the majority of people who've lost moderate amounts of weight, it's likely to produce real improvement in skin quality over time. Now, for those of you who lost very large amounts of weight, and again, we're talking about the 80 pounds, 100 pounds or more, please have that honest conversation with a qualified plastic surgeon. Not because fasting doesn't matter, because at a certain point, structural deficit exceeds what the cellular optimization alone can do with fasting. So both pathways can be right simultaneously. So finally, if you found this update helpful, the single best thing you can do right now is subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss the next video. I cover metabolic health, sports medicine, and evidence-based approaches to longevity, performance. I try to give you the same length of depth and honesty in every video that I'd give a patient sitting across from me in the clinic. And I'll put the link to the original 2021 autophagy and loose skin video down below in the description and in the card, so you should see it either up here or up here. And if you haven't seen it, it covers the foundational science in detail. It's worth watching alongside this update if you haven't watched it before. And finally, if you found this video helpful, please give us a like, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought was the most meaningful part of the video, or if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But if you have general questions, leave them down in the comments below. That does help us rate higher on the algorithm so more people can find it. So I'm Dr. John Martinez. I want to thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button. Look for the link to the 2021 original video. And let's see you in the next video. And if you have questions about what intermittent fasting is or how to do it or some of the problems that people run into with it, I'll link some of my other videos down below that you can also look through.